In September of 1967, a 9-year-old girl named Lisa Wren walked into a cornfield outside Harlow Creek, Colorado, and followed something. Something tall, something grey, something that should not have been standing at the edge of that field at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday. She was gone for 11 hours. She came back. That part everyone agrees on. What nobody agrees on, what nobody has ever been able to explain, is what she was saying when she did. Because when Lisa Wren opened her mouth, the sounds that came out were not English. They were not Spanish, not French, not any language her teachers, her parents, or 3 separate university linguists could identify. She was 9 years old, and she spoke for 6 hours straight without stopping. You're going to want to keep watching. Let's start with what happened. September 14th, 1967, a Saturday. Lisa Wren was playing near the edge of her family's property on the outskirts of Harlow Creek, a town of maybe 400 people tucked into the northeastern shoulder of the San Luis Valley, roughly 40 miles from the Colorado-New Mexico border. The San Luis Valley, if you know anything about UFO research, you already know that name. We'll come back to that. Lisa was alone. Her older brother Thomas had gone inside an hour earlier. Her mother, Mary Wren, was baking. The nearest neighbour was half a mile down a dirt road. By every account, the afternoon was unremarkable. Clear sky. Cool. The kind of Saturday that doesn't ask anything of you. Then Lisa walked into the field. What we know about the next 11 hours comes from 3 sources. Lisa herself, who described the encounter in fragmented detail over the following weeks. A written account compiled by a Pueblo-based researcher named Gerald Marsh in 1971, 4 years after the incident. And a series of tape recordings made by Dr. Lenora Vale of the University of Colorado's Linguistics Department in the spring of 1968, when Lisa was brought in as a subject of study. Those tapes, all 14 of them, were catalogued by the university, flagged as anomalous, and then quietly removed from the department's accessible archive sometime in the mid-1970s. Nobody has produced a satisfying explanation for where they went. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. According to Gerald Marsh's 1971 account, which was based on interviews with Mary Wren and 2 Harlow Creek residents who interacted with Lisa in the days following her return, Lisa had been watching something at the edge of the cornfield, something standing at the tree line. She described it later, haltingly, in the way children describe things they can't quite fit into the vocabulary adults have given them. As tall and thin and pale, with a head that was too large for its body and eyes that caught light in a way she said reminded her of a cat, but bigger. Much bigger, a grey. The description is classic, almost textbook. She said it didn't speak to her, not in words, but she felt, she told her mother, like it was asking her to come, like a question she heard inside her chest, not her ears. And so she went. 9 years old, she followed it into the field between the rows of dried-out September corn, and that was the last anyone saw of her until 2:47 in the morning, when Thomas Wren, 16, sleepless, terrified, found her standing motionless at the kitchen door, standing upright, eyes open, dry, not crying, not visibly injured, just standing there, staring at a fixed point on the kitchen wall, and talking. Here is where the story gets difficult to explain away. Lisa spoke for approximately 6 hours following her return. Mary Wren, according to Marsh's account, initially thought her daughter was praying, or perhaps reciting something she'd memorized, the way children sometimes do when they're frightened or dissociating. She tried to interrupt. She tried to hold Lisa's hands, to sit her down, to offer water. Lisa did not respond to any of it. She kept talking. Thomas recorded some of it. He had a small reel-to-reel recorder he used for music, a gift from his father, who'd left the family 2 years earlier, and he had the presence of mind, or perhaps just the teenage instinct to document the bizarre, to turn it on. Those home recordings are what eventually brought Dr. Vale into the picture, and they're what makes this case, even now, so hard to dismiss. Because what Thomas recorded was not gibberish. This is the critical distinction. and the one that gets glossed over in almost every casual retelling of the Harlow Creek incident. People hear unknown language, and they assume noise. Random syllables, a traumatized child babbling incoherently, that is not what the linguist heard. Dr. Vale, in a letter to a colleague at Stanford dated March 1968, a letter that was photocopied and circulated in academic UFO research circles throughout the early 1970s before the original was apparently lost, described what she heard as structured phonological sequences exhibiting consistent morphemic patterning. She said the vocalization showed evidence of grammar, of syntax, of a systematic relationship between sounds, and, she believed, meaning, she said it was a language. An actual language. She said she had never encountered anything like it. The deeper I went into the Vale correspondence, the stranger the picture became. Because Vale didn't just note the anomaly and move on, she spent 4 months analysing the recordings. She brought in colleagues. She wrote to the Summer Institute of Linguistics in Dallas. She contacted professors at Georgetown at the University of Michigan, at UCLA. She submitted partial transcriptions to a journal, unnamed in the surviving correspondence, possibly the Journal of Linguistics, possibly another publication, and the submission, according to a follow-up letter she wrote in October 1968, was rejected without review. Without review. Not insufficient evidence, not outside our scope. Without review. This raises a simple but critical question. What exactly was being kept out of the conversation? Let me be fair here. The absence of review isn't proof of suppression. Academic journals reject submissions constantly for 1,000 mundane reasons. Vale herself acknowledged that the recordings were of poor quality. Thomas's reel-to-reel was cheap, and much of the 6-hour session was partially obscured by background noise. And let's be honest, a 1968 linguist submitting an analysis of a 9-year-old girl's alleged alien contact language was not going to receive a warm reception in mainstream academic circles. But here's the strange part. Vale stopped writing about the case in 1969. Completely. Her later academic work she published steadily through the 1970s and 1980s on pidgin language formation in Melanesia contains no reference to Harlow Creek, no reference to Lisa Wren, no reference to the recordings. Nothing. It's as if the 4 most intensive months of her career, by her own description in her private correspondence, simply vanished from her professional memory. The silence was deafening. Now. Let's talk about where this happened. The San Luis Valley is a high-altitude basin in south-central Colorado, roughly 150 miles long and 50 miles wide, sitting at an elevation of about 7,500 feet. It is flat, and it is enormous, and it is surrounded by mountains on all sides, and it has been the site of more documented UFO encounters per square mile than almost any other region in the contiguous United States. I want to be careful about how I say that because the documentation is uneven and the research community that tracks these things is not what you'd call rigorous, but the concentration is real, the incidents are real, and they cluster in ways that are, once you start mapping them, difficult to attribute to coincidence. The Snippy the horse mutilation. October 1967, 1 month after Lisa's encounter, King Ranch, Alamosa County, 43 miles from Harlow Creek as the crow flies. The animal's carcass was found stripped of flesh in a manner that baffled the county veterinarian who examined it. No blood at the scene, no tracks around the body. The official explanation was predation. Then it was lightning. Then it quietly stopped being explained at all. The Costilla County sightings of 1966, a series of low-altitude object reports from 7 separate witnesses between March and July of that year, covering a geographic arc that, when plotted on a map, traces a line directly through the area where Lisa Wren would encounter something 14 months later. The Blanca Peak incident of 1971. A survey team from the Colorado Geological Survey reported a 3-hour gap in their field notes during an expedition on the eastern face of Blanca Peak, 28 miles from Harlow Creek. 3 men, none of them knowing one another before the expedition. All 3 reported separately that they had seen a light on the ground, not in the sky, on the ground, moving horizontally at high speed before their memories of the afternoon went dark. When they compared notes that evening, their accounts matched in every detail, except the time. Each man's watch showed a different time, and none of the 3 were correct. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision. I want to be clear, I am not claiming these events are connected. I'm noting that they occurred in the same geographic pocket, within a 5-year window, and that each one shares a specific characteristic. An absence. Missing time, missing documentation, missing explanation. What we're told, when we're told anything at all, is that these incidents are isolated curiosities, rural folklore, misidentifications, the predictable output of isolated communities with overactive imaginations. But what the evidence suggests, when you look at it cumulatively, is something much larger, something that was visiting this valley, repeatedly, over years. And that in September 1967, it made contact, not with a radar operator, not with a military pilot, not with any of the official facing subjects we might expect, but with a 9-year-old girl playing near a cornfield. Why her? That question doesn't have an answer, but it might not be the right question to ask. Let's return to the language itself. In Marsh's 1971 account, he transcribes a short passage that Mary Wren wrote down phonetically during Lisa's 6-hour speaking session. Mary had no linguistic training. She was a farmer's wife who had completed high school and taken 2 years of bookkeeping at a community college in Pueblo. But she was systematic, apparently, and she was frightened, and she sat at her kitchen table and wrote down what she heard as best she could, letter by letter, in a spiral notebook she later gave to Marsh. The transcription Marsh reproduces in his account reads, in part, Avethori Salan, Korenu Davetha, Solanu Chal. I looked at those syllables for a long time. I showed them to 2 professional linguists, both of whom asked that their names not be used, and both said the same thing independently. The phoneme clusters are not random. They follow patterns consistent with an agglutinative language structure, the kind in which meaning is built by adding segments to root words. Turkish works this way. Finnish works this way. Several indigenous languages of the Pacific Northwest work this way, but neither linguist could place these specific syllables in any known language family. Not Proto-Indo-European, not Afro-Asiatic, not Sino-Tibetan, not Uralic, not anything. One of them said something I keep coming back to. She said, "The strangest thing isn't that I can't identify the root words, it's that I can identify the grammar. Whatever this is, it has grammar I recognize as grammar. That's not something a child invents." And that's where the case becomes genuinely impossible to ignore. Because Lisa Wren was 9 years old, living in a town of 400 people in rural Colorado in 1967. She attended a one-room school. Her mother spoke only English. There were no language tapes in the house, no foreign students at the school, no exposure, none that any of the researchers who later looked into her background could document, to any language outside standard American English. Not exposure, not education, not modelling of any kind. So where did the grammar come from? The official explanation, to the extent that one exists, is that Lisa was traumatized, that she created or confabulated a linguistic-seeming output as a response to dissociation, and that her family and the community around her elevated it into something meaningful because they were primed to do so, frightened, isolated, and living in a region that was already steeped in UFO culture. That explanation has a surface plausibility. It really does. Until you look at the veil correspondence, until you look at the linguists who examined the recordings and could not dismiss what they heard, until you look at the trajectory of Dr. Vale's career and ask why a scholar who described the Harlow Creek recordings as the most significant phonological anomaly of her career never mentioned them again. The deeper you go, the official version breaks apart. Lisa stopped speaking after approximately 6 hours. She sat down at the kitchen table, accepted a glass of water, and, according to Mary Wren, looked at her mother with what Mary described as an expression she had never seen on her daughter's face before. Not fear, not confusion, something calmer than either of those. Something, Mary said, that she could only describe as informed, like Lisa knew something now, like she had been given something. Over the following weeks, Lisa returned largely to normal. She went back to school, she played, she ate, she slept. But Mary Wren documented, in notes she kept privately and shared with Marsh, a series of small anomalies in Lisa's behaviour during the months that followed. She would occasionally pause in the middle of a conversation and tilt her head, as if listening to something nobody else could hear. She began drawing geometric patterns obsessively, triangles nested inside circles, spiralling sequences that her teacher noted were unusual in their mathematical precision for a child her age. And twice, in November of 1967 and again in January of 1968, Mary found Lisa standing in the yard at night, looking at the sky, her lips moving silently. Mary asked her what she was saying. Lisa said she was answering. That detail. That single detail. It appears in Marsh's account, and it appears in a separate interview Mary gave to a researcher at a 1972 symposium on anomalous contact experiences in Denver, 2 sources, neither of which was coordinated with the other, both arriving at the same word, answering, not praying, not talking to herself, not playing, answering, as if a question was being asked of her from the sky, and she was providing a response in a language she had been given for exactly that purpose. I want to spend a moment on the tapes. Dr. Vail's 14 recordings were catalogued by the University of Colorado's Department of Linguistics in early 1968, under accession numbers that researchers have been able to partially reconstruct from departmental inventory logs from that period. The accession numbers exist, the logs exist, the tapes do not. A university archivist, speaking informally, not on record, told a researcher named Owen Strelka in 1994 that the tapes were transferred in 1974 or 1975, but that no transfer documentation accompanied them in the archive's records. Transferred where? To whom? For what purpose? No answer was ever provided. Strelka documented this exchange in a self-published monograph from 1996 called The Harlow Creek Anomaly, which circulated among a small community of contact researchers before going out of print. Copies are nearly impossible to find now. I managed to locate one, a photocopy of a photocopy, pages soft and grey from successive generations of reproduction, through a researcher in Albuquerque who asked not to be identified. The monograph is imperfect, the sourcing is sometimes thin, and Strelka allows himself rhetorical flourishes that undermine the credibility of his otherwise careful reconstruction. But the core of what he found is hard to dismiss. 14 tapes, catalogued, gone, no transfer documentation, no receiving institution, no paper trail leading anywhere. Once you register that absence, you start to see it everywhere, in this case. The Vail correspondence, the originals are missing. What survives are photocopies. Mary Wren's private notebooks, given to Marsh and Marsh's own files, were reportedly destroyed in a house fire in 1983. Thomas Wren's reel-to-reel recordings, their current location, is unknown. Thomas himself died in 1991, and no record has been found of his ever speaking publicly about what happened on the night of September 14, 1967. Everything that might have constituted primary evidence has an asterisk next to it. Everything is a copy of something that's been lost. Is this pattern deliberate? Is it bureaucratic entropy, the natural fate of obscure documents in underfunded academic departments? Is it something else? I genuinely don't know, but the pattern seems, in ways that accumulate until they're difficult to wave away, too uniform to be entirely accidental. Here is what I keep returning to. If Lisa Wren spoke a real language, not a performance, not dissociative babble, not a coincidental assemblage of sounds that happened to fool multiple trained linguists, then she was given something, a system, a structured means of encoding meaning and transmitting it to another mind. Knowledge. She was given knowledge. And then, what? She used it for 6 hours and it faded. She retained it in some form. Did she know what she was saying? Did she know what she was answering those nights in the yard, those moving lips, that upturned face? Dr. Vale, in one of her last letters about the case, asked a question that I think is the real centre of all of this. She asked, if this is a language, what is it a language for? Human languages emerge from communities, from thousands of speakers over thousands of years, from social necessity, from the grinding, accumulative work of people needing to tell each other things. What kind of mind, what kind of community, what kind of history produces a language that can be transmitted to a 9-year-old child in 11 hours in a Colorado cornfield? What are they trying to say? What were they trying to say to her specifically? And why, of all the possible recipients for this knowledge, scientists, linguists, government officials, anyone with the infrastructure to record and analyze and preserve, why a child? Why someone with no means of permanently recording what she'd received, no professional network to sound the alarm, no institutional framework to ensure the language survived contact with the world, unless the point wasn't preservation, unless the point was something else entirely. I don't know what that something else is. I'm not sure we have the framework yet to even ask the question properly. Lisa Wren would be in her late 60s now. I looked for her. I looked carefully. There is a Lisa Wren born in Colorado in 1958 who appears in a 1970 census record in Alamosa County. After that, the name disappears from public records. Whether she moved, whether she married and changed her name, whether she's living quietly somewhere in the Mountain West with no desire to revisit what happened to her as a child, I can't say. I found no obituary, I found no interviews, I found nothing. Maybe she's out there, maybe she still tilts her head sometimes and listens. Maybe she still moves her lips in the direction of the sky and says something back. Maybe she remembers what she was given, even now. Maybe it never left, or maybe it did. Maybe whatever was transmitted on that September night in 1967 faded with childhood, stripped away by the grinding normality of a life. School, work, family, time. Until all that remained was a vague unease, a tendency to look up at night, a feeling she couldn't name. Like something immense had passed through her once and left a door she was never able to find again. What does it mean to carry a language in your body that no one on earth can read? What does it mean to have spoken for 6 hours in a tongue that predates every system of human communication we've ever documented? What does it mean that the record of those 6 hours has been so thoroughly dissolved, not destroyed, not debunked, but dissolved quietly, one misplaced tape at a time, one lost notebook, one fire, one academic non-reply, until almost nothing remains? Who or what benefits from that erasure? And what was Lisa Wren answering? Those cold nights in the yard, lips moving in the dark. What question was still being asked of her? And is it still being asked now to someone somewhere in a field we haven't found yet?